Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for waiting and welcome to the new audience members. This is the second session of the Youth IGF-USA. My name is Meri Baghdasaryan, and I'm a member of the inaugural Youth IGF-USA organizing team, and it's my pleasure to moderate the second session. As it was already mentioned during the first session, Youth IGF-USA is aimed at welcoming newcomers and young professionals to the internet governance community at large, and IGF-USA in particular. And while the internet governance ecosystem may be overwhelming at first because it's filled with many acronyms and there are discussions on big issues, we thought that it would be great to actually meet some of the people behind IGF-USA and get a sneak peek into this year's issues and program. So today it's my pleasure to welcome three outstanding representatives of IGF-USA community, namely Shane Tews, non-resident senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, John Perrino, who is a policy analyst at the Stanford Internet Observatory, and as well as Naela, Sarras, Vice President of Stakeholder Engagement for North America at ICANN. So John, Shane, and Naela, thank you so much for joining the inaugural Youth IGF-USA program. And without further ado, I would like to kick off our discussion. So my first question will be about your own journey to this space. And I'm curious to know how you got involved in internet governance. What were the programs or the opportunities that you used, and what actually made you stay engaged in this space? And let's start with Shane.
Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to participate. I watched the first session. It was a great conversation. And one thing I thought I would just add to a lot of the other great thoughts that were put there was the idea of permissionless innovation is one thing that we always have to keep in mind, that the internet allows us to do a lot of things. So it's important that we keep the multi-stakeholder process as part of what we do for permissionless innovation. I'll go into a little bit of that later. But so I actually was the first .com lobbyist in 2001. VeriSign bought a company named Network Solutions, and they were at the time had ComNet and org. And I had spent a lot of time working with the interstate commerce clause for the US. So I had a good understanding from a national perspective of the challenges of moving things in really a physical entity from one state to the other, and where there were, rules of the road around that. And when the internet started to blossom, we started to have a lot of questions from kind of the government or governance side as to where were the delineation lines. And a lot of people used to talk about the law of the sea. There's a whole thing where you're at international waters, things are different than when you're in another area. But I'd always say it's great, you're in the sea, but then when you get back in the river, whose rules are we applying at that point? So it was very important that this multi-stakeholder process that was created allowed anyone who wanted to be on the internet to be a valued entity. So when I think about multi-stakeholder, I think of community first. Technical is very important because we need to make sure we don't break things so they continue to work. Civil society has always had a very important seat at that table. We've had commercial users, which also means that we bring things like a trademark and IP is an issue, because we have to think about that, because we also have laws that have to actually work on the internet. And then we have, get network operations, which is a little bit separate than technical. And then I think of, government's important, but they're not the only one that is, that needs to be at the table. And that's quite different than the way the International Telecommunications Union works, which is it's one country, one vote. And so when you keep in mind the work that you're doing, that you've gotten interested in this, just know you always have a seat at the table. May not always be the same seat. You can change kind of the things that you're doing, but I think it's really important that once you realize the importance of this to the internet, that you stay involved.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is particularly special to join an IGF-USA Youth Forum, because IGF-USA was actually the first internet governance conference that I was ever attended back in 2014. So it's particularly special for me. And what's really great about this community is it's a multi-stakeholder model. Everybody's welcome. Everybody has a voice at the table. So once you kind of just dive in and get engaged and talk to people, get smarter about the issues, there's so many opportunities to just run with things, right? And the internet matters to everyone, everywhere. So it's a particularly unique opportunity. So I first learned about this broader internet policy community back in my undergrad studies. At the time I was taking a social media course. It was, I think, the first social media course that was ever offered in my school. And it was mainly about blogging, and we had to choose topics that were of interest to us, kind of a niche focus area. So I wanted to do something on technology, and I was studying politics. I wanted to do something about politics. And lo and behold, there's this thing, internet policy out there. So ever since, I just tried to meet people working in the space, learn from really smart people, attend events like this, where you get to learn and meet people in the community. And I've been very fortunate to have unique opportunities working with really smart people on mis and disinformation, working on cybersecurity issues, working on online trust and safety issues that are innately global. So, you know, it's an incredible opportunity to get involved. People right out of school can get involved and learn and run with things and really make the most of it. So thanks for hosting this, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, John. And Naela?
Thank you, Meri, and thank you for hosting us to speak about this really awesome subject to talk about. And I'll start by saying, you know, I'm kind of fortunate in that. So I work for ICANN, the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers. And so being involved in or aware of internet governance issues is really kind of built into the job. You can't escape it. And in fact, you have to know about it. And so that's basically, I would say that's where my interest in the topic comes from. And that's why I continue to be engaged in this space. And I actually really love it and enjoy it. My roots in ICANN come from the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. So I worked in that function for a long time. And in that function, it was really interesting. It was seeing, if you will, internet governance happening like almost on a day-to-day basis, because you're dealing with, specifically on the country code top-level domain side, you're working with different countries and how they choose to enact laws and regulations in their countries and how they affect. They have policy effect on the internet, and they also have technical effects on the internet. And then IANA, of course, has to, but by default and by nature, has to stay very, very neutral. It doesn't get involved in any of these issues, but just that awareness of what's happening in each country and how that is impacting the internet. In terms of being involved in ICANN as a staff member, ICANN is very much follows the model that we're looking at here in an internet governance model, right? It's a multi-stakeholder model. It brings together, as Shen said earlier, governments, non-commercial and commercial stakeholders, civil society, individuals. They each come together and they represent different interests used on the internet, and so collectively, this is making up the ICANN community. We're all involved in these policies, DNS policies that keep the internet open, transparent, consensus-driven, bottom-up process. So that's basically the involvement there from the ICANN side. Now, as ICANN staff, we have different roles that we do in terms of involvement in the different IGF forums. We're involved in, you know, from as little as being on steering committees or actually helping, you know, being on sessions and panels. So we have a very wide range of interests and very wide range of involvement in many of either the International Global Forum or the nations. But at the end of the day, ICANN and as a staff, we participate in this because we see that there are many, the internet is facing many questions that pertain to cybersecurity, data, privacy, encryption, and many more. And these are being addressed by governments and businesses and public interests and civil society organizations and citizens, etc. So it's very important for this is an area where internet governance is very important. Sometimes trying to address one or more of these issues may encroach on technical aspects of the system or the internet. And so it's really very important for all of us to be keen and aware of what's being discussed and what the potential impact is on the system as a whole. And so I would say that's basically what drives my personal interest in internet governance, and also as an employee of ICANN in being involved in internet governance.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's so interesting to see what different paths lead to this space. And I have a follow-up question. So it is a fact that you three represent different stakeholder groups. Sometimes you overlap in different roles, but we can say that you present different stakeholder groups in this multi-stakeholder ecosystem. So I would love to hear you reflect a bit about this question of how your role within a specific stakeholder group actually impacts your engagement in this space, and how it is to be in the shoes of different stakeholder groups. Let's put the question that way. And if there's anyone that wants to jump in first, please go ahead.
So taking just a slightly different turn on that, and then I'll answer your specific question. You reminded me of a story. When I first started, I'm not an engineer, and I've done policy my whole life. And so I wanted to really understand the process of what was going on. And so this was a long time ago when whiteboards were, real whiteboards were a thing. And I had some engineers whiteboarding the process out for me. And it took this kind of weird turn. And I said, what happened there? Why did you guys design it that way? They go, that's your fault. And I was like, my fault? I just showed up. And he goes, that's because of a policy decision that was made. And you could see by looking at the way they were setting out the kind of if then what scenario, that if it had been just completely technical, it would have taken a different turn. And I always took that to heart when I was working on anything, and still do in policy, that you need to be very cautious about taking the ebb and flow of the way that technology works because of a policy decision. I end up there's a privacy bill that's going through right now on the House. I think passed the House Energy and Commerce Committee this morning. And then you look at like the GDPR and things like that, and how that it will change and morph the way we use technology, the way, commercial users use technology. So that's something I always have in my mind, especially when I go to ICANN meetings. I currently don't actually represent any particular community. I'm just, I'm an observer of the process because I've been doing it for so long. I do work for NBC Universal. So I do have IP in the back of my head. A lot of times when I'm there, I'm kind of listening towards that, which is just, making sure that you can keep your commercial rights there. But I like listening to all the dialogues. I've been very fortunate. I've worked for what they call one of the contracted party houses, which means the company that runs .com. And I've worked a lot with the registrars, but I've also seen the importance of the non-commercial users constituency. And, I actually spend most of my time in the government advisory committee, which is where all the governments get together. You definitely very quickly see that the people change out of that portfolio. They'll move from doing ICANN to something else. It's almost like an ICANN 101 every couple of years. And it's tough for the rest of the ICANN community to have to constantly bring the governments up to speed. So that is, I'd say, one of the challenges of the multi-stakeholder process is a lot of us have been in those rooms for a very long time. And then you get a newbie and it's like, how quick can I get them up to speed? And then a lot of times they want to go repeat something that you're like, oh, we did that in 2004, which is very frustrating for a new person. So a lot of it's making sure you have people there that are quick learners, have a good understanding of the process. And then I'm a huge believer of just ask a lot of questions.
Thank you so much, Shane. I love the example, which vividly shows the importance of having dialogue between different experts and people doing different parts of the same process. Yeah, really appreciate you sharing that. And also love the ICANN 101 example. I think a lot of people involved with ICANN will attest to the same. John, Naela, who wants to jump in next?
I'll jump in next on the ICANN 101 and what Shane said about the just sharing information about what's happening. So in my role as somebody that looks after engagement for the North America region, I find that we do a lot of, and we're not representing one stakeholder, right? So it's a multi-stakeholder model that we work under. But recently, I found that in the last 1 to 2 years, I can say one of the biggest efforts we've been focusing on is two things. One, in ICANN, there's a government engagement team that is basically focused on, what legislation is popping up around the world and how is it developing, and if it does go through, what does it mean for the internet? They're not there advocating for one or the other, but they're studying, what impact does this have on the technical functioning of the internet and the part that is within ICANN's remit. So we set up a lot of these. We do a lot of private meetings, like one-on-one meetings, if people are asking to be briefed on what's happening in a certain legislation or in a certain country that's working on one. We do a lot of, now ICANN has introduced, in the ICANN meetings, I think at every ICANN meeting, we have an internet governance session that happens that basically just runs through, this is what's happening here, this is what's happening here, and here are the impacts that we know of. So a lot of this is happening right now. I think there's a number of issues that are, I mentioned in my earlier intervention, a lot of these topics, right? Privacy, data protection, cybersecurity, encryption, all of that is happening, and everybody wants to do something that regulates it, or that creates some kind of an environment where it's regulated in a legislative environment, maybe in a specific country. So we find that we're doing a lot of these in ICANN. The government engagement team that I just mentioned, one of the things that they do, and I'll put the link here in the chat box in a minute, they actually have white papers that they put out every once in a while. That some of them are about just in general what's happening in governance issues that they see, and some of them are country study papers where they'll take a specific country. I think there's one on the Netherlands that happened in the last year or two. There's one on Russia. I think there's even more than one on Russia. So they do a lot of that. They dedicate a lot of those resources there. So let me go ahead and put something there in the chat, the GE papers.
Thank you, Naela. I really appreciate sharing more resources. And in the meantime, before we go to John, I would love to remind our audience to submit questions in the chat. I will try to incorporate them as the discussion flows. Feel free to ask any questions that you can think of. And John, please take it away.
Yeah, so something really exciting about working in academia is that you get to take a point of neutrality. And it's incredibly important to collaborate and learn from both industry stakeholders and from government stakeholders, particularly working in this internet policy space. So currently I'm working for a research center at Stanford University, Stanford Internet Observatory, and we do online trust and safety research, mostly focused on social media platforms and the spread of misdis and malinformation online. And what we try and do is we try and bridge the academic, industry, and government communities, which is, a big reason why I love my job and part of this internet governance community, because we try and inform policy with both academic-based research and immediate outputs to inform decisions that platforms and that policymakers have to put together. And we bring technologists to the table. We bring academics to the table to have those discussions, to make sure that policy is being created, like Shane was saying, with the input of engineers and policymakers, to ground policy in what is technologically feasible, and to make sure that we are also protecting fundamental rights at the same time. So I try and think about the multi-stakeholder model in a way where it's not just, which community are you representing, but the importance about working with others, about hearing other perspectives, about being open to those other perspectives, right, in order to move the conversation forward. At the same time, once you go into the space, there are so many acronyms and so many things to learn. You know, if I ever went back for another degree, I would probably do it in history. Even though I love working in internet policy, I'd probably go back and study history, just because it's so important to understand the evolution of communication technologies over time, to see kind of crossover in the debates that we're having now and the debates that were had before, and to learn from those, and to bring people with unique perspectives, unique education, unique backgrounds all together at the table. That's the only way, I think, to really effectively, if chaotically, help govern and develop policies that will continue to provide a free, open, and secure internet.
Thank you so much for sharing. Shane, did you want to?
I added into the chat when you brought up the different governments, the question when the Ukraine was attacked by Russia, there was some people that thought that we should take .ru. They petitioned ICANN to take .ru out of the root zone. And my piece, my point of view, which I think a lot of people, you know, it's, from a democratic perspective, it's one of the worst things you could do, because you would be giving people the one ability to understand what's going on outside their country. They would lose that opportunity. So I just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Thank you so much. That's a great point, and a recent example that illustrates the importance of, thinking about global implications and also the local impact of such decisions. Thank you for sharing that. So I loved your points about the importance of dialogue and working together and incorporating different perspectives. And as we view multi-stakeholders from that angle, I would love to move to my next big question, which is, what is on your agenda for IGF-USA this year? And what do you think, which are the discussions that participants, especially newcomers, should focus on this year?
So I'm actually moderating a conversation, we're calling it When the Cookie Crumbles, which is about online web cookies. But it's going to be a discussion more about privacy, or as I actually think about it, data, because I think data is something that you can legislate and you can make rules and guidance around it. Privacy is more of an emotion and feeling, but for the sake of what the world calls it, we'll call it privacy. And there's a lot going on, especially in Europe right now. I mentioned there's the GDPR, which passed, or I guess Melinda mentioned that earlier, the GDPR, which passed 5 years ago. And we have the Data Act, which has just recently come into fruition. And then we have the Digital Markets Act, which I'm pretty sure, I keep waiting for a law firm to do the due diligence, but I haven't seen it yet, that if you try to comply with all three, you're going to be out of compliance with one. So it's then you're doing a risk analysis of where can I comply? Is it most important? Where are the chances that I'm going to get in trouble? But the conversation is going to have somebody from the advertising, internet advertising, interactive advertising bureaus. So he is most recently from Amazon. So he has seen kind of the inside of how that operation works. And Amazon's different because it's a first party. So you'll hear the difference between first party and third party. First party means you're keeping it within the family. In this case, everything that Amazon learns, they use and sell within the Amazon environment. Third party is when your information is getting sold and or used off the premise of the original intent. And that's a challenge. I say, if I could pass this, I was talking to a reporter yesterday about this privacy legislation, and I said, transparency and accountability to me are the most important things in this area. You should be very transparent about what you're going to do, and then you're going to be accountable to what you say you're going to do. And then ultimately there should be an audit function as well. But the transparency could say, I'm the devil and I'm going to sell your information to everyone that'll buy it from me. And if I say yes to that in the terms of use, I've agreed to it. That's a binding contract or an agreement. So it's very, I think part of our challenge is these click-through menus that are 36 pages of things that no one ever reads. And so trying to make that a simpler process so people just understand where their data is flowing and they have an easier understanding than of saying yes or no. Yes, I'm fine with that. I want what is on the other side of that app, or I want to be able to download that app, and the inability of not having the time or really making it very easy for people to understand where all that information is flowing. I would really like to see that change. So that is going to be a fun conversation that we're going to have tomorrow.
That really sounds like fun and touching upon so many current issues all over the world, I would say.
They're all kind of intertwined,
John, yeah. John,
Yeah, so you can kind of tell the two sessions I put the most time into because they both start the same way, and that's the word beyond. So two morning opening plenary sessions that I was involved in are the beyond content, improving trust and safety and enabling user choice, and then the beyond the encrypted content debate. So I'm really excited to have a discussion on content moderation, which is not first and foremost centered on Section 230 here in the US, but goes on to discuss, like Shane was just saying, transparency and accountability mechanisms for platforms and for users online. And what we were really trying to do, the working groups that we're putting together these panels, is to not rehash the same conversation that we've had most years. And for content moderation, again, that's mainly Section 230, the part of the Communications Decency Act that's still standing and gives somewhat like protections, but not full protections to social media platforms for user-generated content. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to give too much on Section 230, but because I'm not a lawyer, I wanted to move on beyond, what are the current legal standings to how do we blend technical understanding of the difficulties of content moderation online and with policy that also preserves online freedom of speech, which we, vehemently believe in the United States and have First Amendment protections that exist to, there are unique protections in the United States. So I'm excited to bring someone from the Anti-Defamation League, who every day is looking at ways to prevent online hate and harassment for a variety of vulnerable communities. We're bringing an expert on public opinion about content moderation. So what does the American public believe, and how do they want the issue of content moderation handled? We're bringing a lawyer and a researcher on ways to design better content moderation online and improve trust and safety, ways to bring in third parties into the conversation, and also an industry representative to give that input about how social media companies are addressing this and find a mutual way forward. So really excited about that content moderation debate, and also really excited about talking about encryption, but not talking about, should encryption exist, should end-to-end encryption exist, but rather how do we protect that and still hold people accountable by ways that don't encroach on privacy, but rather use public information, hidden kind of hashed information that doesn't look at actual content, that gives the protections that are needed for human rights, for essential services online, but still address concerns about trust and safety. So both of these conversations are really about finding a mutual path forward. And that's why I'm really excited about them. Also very excited for the conversation that Shane's hosting later in the day on GDPR, how the cookie crumbles. What a fantastic name. And also the Melinda session at the end of the day. You got to talk about the geopolitics, the splinternet and internet fragmentation right now with everything going on. So there's going to be a bunch of fantastic conversations.
That all really sounds wonderful, and I really love the framing with the word beyond, because I really think we need that discussion beyond the general discourse around these issues. So really look forward to that, and I hope our audience members are taking notes of the names, which are really great, and will join the sessions tomorrow. And last but not least, Naela, what's on your agenda?
Thanks, Meri. So for me, first of all, I want to congratulate the organizers for this. We're really happy to be coming to this in person again, and I think they put together a really great program that we're looking forward to. So congratulations. I will kind of start in the backwards order. High on our list, what John just mentioned, right? I think the session Melinda is organizing, is moderating. I think we're calling that one geopolitics. As you can imagine, that's a really important session, for ICANN to monitor, keeping the internet interoperable. One cohesive internet is very important. Preventing fragmentation. I know Shane brought up the RU letter that came to ICANN as well as other internet partners in terms of taking out RU and the IDN for RU, which is RF. What the implications of that would have meant, right? I think ICANN had a very clear answer to that letter in that it has two elements that do not allow it to do what that letter says from a policy point of view and then from a technical point of view. And then the ultimate implication from that would be, we would have sacrificed the multi-stakeholder model, and are we ready to do that, right? It has huge implications on the multi-stakeholder model. So that's one that's really high on our agenda. I actually, I have an ICANN colleague who will be sitting on that as a panelist on that panel, as well as a few of really excellent panelists. So that should be a really great session to attend. We'll also be paying attention to the one that Shane is moderating about the unintended consequences of GDPR. That's really an important one as well. So we'll be there. I think it's great that you have Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Communications and Information and NTI Administrator Ellen Davidson opening. So we'll definitely be there at the opening for that one. And then really we have enough people to cover all the sessions. I think all of them should be really great and informative and fun to attend. So I would encourage you, if you have the time, to attend them as much as possible.
There's also one I'm not participating. I think it's the same time as mine, but I've worked on the planning on before, which is on Internet of Things. It's more of a network operation panel that, as we have more and more devices that automatically connect to the network, what are the opportunities for security and the challenges for security in that area? So if you're interested in that, that's usually a really good panel, and they have some great speakers on that one as well.
Thank you so much for sharing really outstanding sessions. I look forward to joining remotely, and I'm really glad that IGF-USA is back in the hybrid mode. In the meantime, I've received an audience question, which reads as follows. What is missing from internet governance, if anything, institutions or dialogue around certain upcoming issues? I know it's a broad question, but would love to hear any thoughts.
I would say the one thing that sometimes feels like it's missing is time. There's so many good dialogues that are going on that you kind of have to sometimes pick the area that is the most relevant and important to you at that point in time and follow it along. Luckily, one of the things the internet's great at is keeping a record. I noticed that Jolly put the real-time text in the very top of the feed. That's very helpful. Often when there's two things that are going on, I actually have two computers in front of me, so I'll pull one of them up and I'll grab the grab the feed while I'm looking at another one, and it gives you the opportunity to go back and watch it, as well as it is, YouTube and all the different ways that you can watch things afterwards. It gives you the opportunity to go back. Sometimes if it wasn't a priority on Tuesday, but you can get to it on Wednesday. But I think the key is the people that care about this space are very involved, and that's really important. And it isn't necessarily because it's their day job. In some cases it is, but for a lot of us, it's kind of like a lifetime passion now.
I agree with the comment about time. There is never enough time. And Naela or John, do you have any thoughts?
I would say time is definitely an issue, and that would have been one of my recommendations, is to perhaps, instead of trying to cover all the topics that are brought up in internet governance, maybe zero in on, find out what's your passion, why you're interested in, and zero in on that one. Because I agree, I think trying to cover everything is just overwhelming, and there's so many conversations and so many podcasts and websites and places to review. So perhaps I think maybe zoning in or focusing on one area and dedicating that to it. And maybe what could be more in terms of what's missing, that's a really good question, could be some some ways to kind of help people in like find that passion or find that area of interest, like a mentorship or ability to like come in and say, you know, this is an area that needs a lot of time and a lot of focus. You know, if you're willing, put your time into that one, perhaps.
As a big advocate of all those efforts, especially with mentorship, I definitely would love to see more of that, especially for newcomers, because it's really overwhelming when you see all the issues and all the acronyms at first. John?
Yeah, I think both of those things are great points. I'm needing time, and none of us have enough time, and there's no way anyone can be familiar with all the different issues going on. But that also creates unique opportunities for folks who are new to the field. You know, if you can find really good mentors, people to learn from, there are so many opportunities again to just kind of run with things. If you're open to learning on the fly and learning from other people, and willing to, you know, go up to a table of people at a session that you've never met before and just kind of introduce yourself and get to meet people. I found those are lasting relationships and create really unique opportunities to really early in your career put on programming, develop research on really important issues, right? So it can feel really overwhelming, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges. There's a really great type of a kind of wiki page on all these different internet governance acronyms and the people and the different points of views. There's a lot of different ways where you can kind of self-teach. There's a lot of opportunities to get in the room and meet other people and just take that kind of startup mentality of, I'm going to go run with things. I'm going to go learn. I might not get it quite right, but I'm going to run with things and try and help this community.
Thank you. I would encourage our audience members to keep sending me their questions. And in the meantime, I would love to build on John's response because I would really love to dig deeper into your advice on to newcomers about how to not feel too overwhelmed or how to stay engaged further in this space. As we mentioned, this program is for newcomers and young professionals who would love to dig deeper into internet governance and make best use of their expertise. So would really love to hear your thoughts on specific maybe programs or mentorship initiatives or anything. If you can bring some examples, it would be great. If not, like what helped you to stay engaged further?
I would highly recommend grabbing a buddy. So, I mean, like John says, somebody who seems to know what they're talking about, or you see them walking off a panel, stopping and talking to them and seeing if you can stay in touch with them, or, just have a couple of follow-up questions. The key to that being a successful long-term relationship is being informed when you're having the conversation. I know it's a delicate balance because you want to learn more, but you don't want to come at it. Like there's sometimes where people come up and start talking to me and I'm like, could you formulate your questions and then we can have this conversation? Or other times I'll get really deep and be like, you are so spot on. You're asking all the right questions. Let's go. I might not have the answers, but let's go introduce you to some people that do. And I'll walk you across the room and introduce you to different people. Also, because we have the archive, several years ago, we did an interview with Vint Cerf and Steve Crocker, who are two, HTTPS, we wouldn't have, the type of connection on the internet if it wasn't for those guys working as hard as they did. And it was going on, it was about an hour, and Vint Cerf, I was in the front, and Vint Cerf kept looking at me like, you're going to cut this off soon, right? Because it was a reporter was interviewing them. And I was just enjoying it so much. I was like, nope, you guys are going to keep talking. And you can go back and watch it. And they just tell really interesting stories about, they met in German class in school in Los Angeles. And then they ended up working at DARPA, at DOD, creating one of the core infrastructure parts of the internet. So, so don't be shy about, talking to people, just, go ahead and ask the questions, but then the best thing to do is what I call rabbit holing, is I just kind of get in a thing and I just Google a lot of things and figure it out, and then figure out who the next person is that I should talk to. And there are, there are a lot of resources out there, but go ahead and use the human ones as well.
Yeah, I'll kind of jump off of what Shane is saying there. The first time I attended the IGF-USA conference, I knew next to nobody. I was still in undergraduate, and I'm an introvert. And I walked out of that conference with multiple lifelong friends who I to this day stay in touch with, and they've gone into public service, and we've stayed in touch through that, and continue to actively collaborate. And my first job in internet policy was with the Internet Education Foundation. Shane's on the board, and Shane and this community of folks who have been in the space a little longer than I have are incredible resources. But I think, Shane, let me know what you think about this. But they're looking for people who are go-getters. They're looking for people who care about what's happened before and are looking to continue the conversations and keep things moving. So if you're a go-getter, if you're someone who is willing to read up on the issues, and if you're willing to be candid when you might not be so familiar with the topic, and just be candid about that, ask for resources, and then get really smart on it and look for opportunities to contribute to the work that others are doing, to host conversations like you're doing with really smart people that then help bring more people into the conversation, that help bring more people to the table, that help welcome more people to this community. I think that's what it's really about. Committing to issue areas that you're passionate about, learning from others, and then helping build that community and contributing.
John reminded me of a resource is the Foundry, which is under the umbrella of the Internet Education Foundation. So especially if you're a law student, they have a job board that's there, which is great. And they're mostly technical and legal. But the idea was there's a group, the telecommunications industry has been organized for a very long time. And so part of that was emulating their way of mentoring and bringing people up into their regulatory and legal structure. And so this is similar, but it also has more of the breadth of the way tech people are. They have I don't know, John, you might know, do they do the trivia nights outside of DC?
I believe there's there's the Bay Area one that it all stems from, that I believe, I want to say EFF has put it forward, but
yeah, I mean, they are raucous. They sell out in a heartbeat, and it is a bunch of people that know stuff, and they want to demonstrate it, and they have a great time doing it. So you might take a look at the Foundry website and see if that's a good resource for you in the fact that most of you are students and kind of looking if this is an area you want to spend more time.
As a current Foundry Fellow, I would second that. And we will also have Ellen, our secretary, on the next panel, talking more about the Foundry and ways to get involved. So I love that we're already seeing connections and building bridges there. And in terms of the trivia, yes, I think the trivia night in DC was during State of the Net, like in February, and there was one in June organized by EFF, the annual cyber law trivia night. But yeah, we would love to have more, and I can share that there are internal discussions on having more of these pop-up trivia nights because they're fun and also a great way to meet like-minded people. And Naela, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, because Shane is talking about more structured programs, I wanted to say that ICANN has at least 2 programs that are focused on newcomers. One is called the Fellowship Program, and I think you shared with us, Meri, earlier that you're a fellow, right? You're a previous fellow to ICANN. And then the second program is the Next Gen program. Next Gen is really focused on college students, university students, ages 18 to 30. And it's focused on attracting people into but basically it provides a program. There's travel to the ICANN meeting, there is lodging at the ICANN meeting, and then a little stipend. And the idea is to encourage people to come into the ICANN world and see, what topics and what issues that are being discussed inside ICANN are of interest. So I would encourage you to take advantage of those programs. I'll put the links here in the chat in a minute. if you come through ICANN and you see that internet governance is something what you want to continue on, by any means, keep going with internet governance. And then you might find that there's other topics that are being discussed in ICANN that are also of interest. Technical topics, policy topics, all of that, right, happens in that multi-stakeholder model. So I'd say take advantage of the programs that are out there, and join by all means, because as John and Shane both said, we're all desperate for new people. I think this internet governance and the internet as a whole will only benefit from having new ideas, new people participate and contribute and make it even.
Thank you so much for sharing. I will also add the Internet Society's Youth Ambassadors Program, which was the one that kickstarted me in this space, which I think then was called Youth Fellows at the Internet Governance Forum. So it's less technical than the ICANN program because it's more generic internet governance program, but definitely a great way to meet new people. And same as John, I didn't know anyone and ended up just stumbling upon the community and staying because it's amazing. So definitely would recommend that as well. And I have a follow-up question to what Naela mentioned in her previous interventions. You said that maybe there are some topics that will need that are in need for more involvement or engagement, some more than the others. So if you have any examples for such issue areas or topics, I think our audience would love to hear that as well, because that may help them understand if one of those will work out for them.
Sorry, it would help to unmute. I think that so one of the way ICANN is made up is one of the advisory committees that sit under ICANN is called the RSAC, the Root Server System Advisory Committee, for example. And that looks at issues basically pertaining to root server system. I'm just giving an example here. So the advisory committee does what it does, right? They create advice and raise it to the ICANN board concerning root server system. But under RSAC, there's something called the RSAC caucus, which is sort of an extension of RSAC, because RSAC is made up of operators, root server operators. So there's only 12 organizations in the world that operate 1,000+ root servers that serve the root zone of the internet. So to be on the RSAC is a very limited group. It's limited to the root server operators. But they also use, it's almost like a research arm of RSAC or like an extended arm for technical topics. It's called the RSAC caucus. And people can join the RSAC caucus based on their technical expertise, and there's different things that they study. They do working groups to study a certain issue and come up with develop papers and white papers to discuss specific issues. So I encourage people to always, look at things like that. The caucus, the RSAC caucus, for example. I would say in any of the groups that are internet related, I would highly encourage women to come and join because I think this is an area that is sadly still doesn't have enough women participating. And so I would say if you're a woman in this field, and I'm not trying to exclude anyone, but please do join and make your voice heard, because that is still, still not unusual to walk into a room and find that it's, women are still the minority there. Jeremy and Meri and I were joking earlier before we came into this room how, we still refer to the fathers of the internet and forget that there were many people that made the internet happen, not just the fathers of the internet. So I would say, please come contribute to the diversity of this ecosystem and also to having different voices contribute to technical discussions that are happening.
Thank you so much. I second all those points. Let's make the community more diverse for sure. John or Shane, do you have any thoughts on areas that you think will benefit from more engagement, or some topics that are, not covered enough in your opinion?
Actually, you mentioned the state of the net. There are several things that kind of are usually they moved it this year to March, but it's more on the policy topic. So it's a little broader than ICANN. It's more towards internet governance, but even though it takes place in Washington, they try to look at sometimes global issues. So that's something I would take a look out for. If you super want to geek out, the plenty of potential areas this year. The Internet Telecommunications Union every 4 years has a meeting where they talk about the global entities of what they call ICT, International Communications and Technology. And it's the internet falls underneath that. And it's a little bit of the friction point between, the UN wanting to have a one country, one vote, especially around treaties versus the world that we're talking about, which is that permissionless innovation I mentioned at the very beginning. And that's in September. So like if you want to go to like the Big Daddy World Series of geekdom in policy in this area, the plenty of potential areas this year. So, you get extra credit for that one.
Something I'd add, kind of going off of the importance of diversity and inclusion and global perspectives on these issues. So working on online trust and safety, there are so many distinct cultural and regional perspectives on this, distinct kind of regulatory regimes around the world. It has been amazing to connect with folks who are not often part of these conversations in DC, where I've been based for more than a decade now, and learning from folks across the African continent who are often responsible for content moderation and enforcement on the platforms and for providing for the trust and safety of users around the world. So for me, that's really highlighted in this one specific area why it's so important. You need to have many different language skills, unique understanding of culture, of unique perspectives on different political views, on unique political situations around the world. And, frankly, you can't do that with a bunch of white guys like me in DC, right? I want to be in the rooms where I learn from many different people, from many different backgrounds. And when I get to be in mainly Zoom rooms right now with those people, I learn something. I learn a lot of things, right? So it's so important. And I think, trust and safety is uniquely open to that because it's very global, and it, frankly, involves a lot of people from the global south who are perhaps more prone to violent ramifications of particular spread of content online. And so learn about those unique challenges and how folks can work together.
Thank you so much for sharing these examples. I think there was a lot of inspiration flying around in the last hour for our newcomers to, think which path they want to take, which programs they can take advantage of, and especially which sessions they should be on the lookout for tomorrow during IGF-USA 2022. With this, I would like to thank Shane, Naela, and John for their time and insights into internet governance at large and IGF-USA in particular. Unless our audience members have any questions, I don't see anything in my chat. I would love to conclude this session. Hope to see everyone during our final session, which will start in about 15 minutes, which will be about youth engagement in particular. We'll be hearing from 3 representatives of 3 youth organizations in the internet governance ecosystem from different regional groups, and I hope this will provide more insights to newcomers on how they can get involved wherever they are based, because I also see in the chat that we have participants from outside US, which I'm really happy to see. And with this, I'll say thank you, and we will take a 15-minute recess, and then my colleague Jeremy will take off from there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much for having us.